Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find the tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara. And look who's here.
Alex is back.
Yes.
Hello again.
My youngest sister, Alex. She is the one who disclosed the abuse to me 10 years ago. It's been 10 years last month.
I know.
Hard to believe it's been that long ago.
Yeah.
But there was a big request to have Alex back on the show. We had her on. I don't even remember what episode it was. I'll link to it in the description. But I think people were really intrigued, Alex, with your side of things because, one, you had the courage to tell not just somebody about the abuse, but myself and your mom. So your brother, your mom. The abuse was by your own father, our father. I was, and still am, a minister at the time. So there are just all these components, I think, that makes this incredibly unique and powerful because the churches typically don't handle abuse allegations well. And I think we walked through that really well as a family. But we'll start off, first of all, before we get into this episode, another huge thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. You guys are incredible, and we could not do this podcast without you.
Amen. Thank you.
Yes. So, people specifically wanted to hear more about your healing journey. Last time that we had you on, we talked about kind of what led you to disclose the abuse and kind of the initial response. But here we are 10 years later, and a lot of people are really interested in knowing what that journey looked like. So it's been 10 years officially, more than 10 years. How do you feel that your mental health is now compared to 10 years ago?
It's definitely a lot better. I would say that my mental health and healing journey hasn't been linear. There's definitely been a lot of ups and downs and times when I think I'm okay and then something random will trigger like a bout of depression or a panic attack or something. But overall, on the day-to-day, I feel like much more safe and confident and generally okay to get through my days, whereas before, 10 years ago, so about the time right after I disclosed the abuse, I was very much suicidal, and I felt like I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown pretty much every day. Like every day was a struggle just to wake up. Was that after you disclosed it? Yeah.
So what do you think attributed the I mean, that's a huge and quick, probably surprised the crap out of you to find yourself in that desperate of a mental decline. What do you think was attributed to that? Because, you know, this is interesting for me, and it just speaks to the importance of handling allegations right. Because we did. I mean, we reported, you disclosed on a Friday. We were in the police station as soon as it opened on Monday, making the report. With your knowledge, with your blessing, you also were more than willing, and you did talk to police. So given all of that everything was handled, I think, exceptionally well at the time, why do you think there was such anxiety and such a push towards depression and suicidal
I think
thoughts?
It felt like my whole world was falling apart. Like everything that I thought I knew about my life and our family up to that point, it was then confirmed that like all of my suspicions of abuse were true. The things I felt, like what I had, were only small flashbacks, and I didn't even know if it was really real that I had been abused. It was confirmed that I was. And then it was the whole trying to figure out who could I trust, who couldn't I trust, what was real, what was a lie, what parts of my personality were actually me, what parts were there just as a result of the abuse. So it was like everything was a question. I didn't know anything for sure, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I talked about this when I wrote my book. I talked about the instant identity crisis that I had, where I wrestled with, I mean, probably a fraction of those things because I was not sexually abused by him. And I know the crisis that I went through, and I can't even begin to imagine what that would have been like for all of my dad's victims, especially in the family, because it really does mess with you. My childhood, I think, was a lot different because I had all good memories.
Mm-hmm.
And that really screwed with me because I was like, that wasn't my childhood was not the same as your childhood at all. Like, you lived in terror, and
I think what's conflicting,
horrific.
Alex, what was probably really conflicting was you had those good moments too.
Yeah.
You had good memories too.
I was questioning if they were real. Were the good moments even real, like family vacations?
Right.
Or, for one example, I love hiking and being outdoors, and I got all of that love for the outdoors from him.
Right.
And I was like, okay, now this big part of me that was shaped by him, like, can I count that those were good memories?
Right.
Or was it all just part of his manipulation, doing good things with me so he could manipulate me and abuse me later? So everything was just like thousands of questions running through my mind, and I couldn't shut it off. I couldn't
Questions
have
and
any
lies.
peace.
How do you, you said it, how do you pull the truth out of so many lies?
Yeah.
And it's awful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Terrible.
I think it's just hard to fathom how much that messes with your identity, because your identity is shaped by your experiences. It's shaped by your family. It's shaped by the influences, both good and bad, of your experiences throughout your childhood. And, we've mentioned multiple times on this podcast that he wasn't verbally abusive, and he didn't cuss, and he wasn't rude. He wasn't pushy, at least, for the most part.
No.
But even in the home, there was manipulation, and I could see that now as an adult looking back, but never.
It wasn't the yelling, screaming, go to your room or you're grounded or
never.
whatever.
No. Yeah. And that, for me, that's almost harder than if he was a piece of crap who
I think
pushed
it
us
makes
around.
it much worse, because here's this person who, there's such contrasting sides to this person. There's such a nice side. You almost wish he would have been a horrible, horrible person, screaming, yelling horrible things and doing nasty things, than this nice person who did the most evil of things. That, to me, is worse.
Yeah.
With, trying to sort that out in your mind.
Yeah. Well, over the years, what are things that you've done to care for yourself? Because I know just, again, from my experience, it's kind of a bizarre thing, because the further I get away from that 10-year mark, when that all first happened, the lonelier I get. So I can't wrap my mind around, as an abuse survivor, it's not something that you freely talk about or want to freely talk about. And that isolation it's real. So, what are some things that you've done to care for yourself over these past 10 years?
It's been, I think, a lot of self-inquiry and trying to figure out what my needs are at a given time, and actually listening to myself and doing that, because there are times that I do want to talk about it, and I gravitate towards friends that I can talk to, maybe friends who have had a similar experience, or at least are understanding enough to listen. And then there will be times where I'm go, where I need distractions and to just do anything I can to avoid getting too in my thoughts and overthinking. But then on the flip side, there are times where I just need to rest and not answer my phone and tune the world out and just like take me time. So it's just constant evaluating what are my needs today and doing that.
Boy, that's really powerful. Because I think about, I don't know, they're just, I see patterns where people get locked into these really almost toxic patterns, and they know it, but they're like, this is my therapy. My therapy is the outdoors or whatever it is. And so they just binge on that and binge, and I need more of it.
There have definitely been things like that for me. Yeah.
I mean, you burn out even doing the things that you love, where the things that you love that used to bring you calm and peace, now it's a source of anxiety. When am I going to schedule time to go on a hike? I got to fit it in. That's what makes me well. That's what, that's what brings healing. And you end up creating more anxiety. So that's really powerful, to listen to your intuition, really. And that's day by day. What do I need today? And that may be lounging in bed, not getting out of bed for the day.
Yeah, I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took a long while to get there, especially with when I was in go mode, like I said. It's very hard to say no to people, to the point where this group of friends or this coworker or this person asked me to do a job for them, and it was like from the time I woke up until maybe midnight, I didn't have like 10 minutes to myself, because I constantly felt like I needed to go to the next thing and the next thing and can't say no to anybody. Which, I mean, that's not just, mental health thing. I'm sure everybody deals with that at some point.
Yeah.
But
what I'm hearing is you're using introspection, learning to love yourself. And I think that's so important. Because let's face it, abuse of any kind, and especially allergies, what you endured, leaves you with a feeling of, for a long time, of lack of self-worth, I'm sure. And you've done a beautiful job of just bringing out the beauty in yourself, your talents, your beauty, your just who you are. And that's a daily introspection, I believe. And when I listen to you, and I know what turmoil you went through those first few years after disclosing the abuse, to see you now calm and mature, self-assured, is really wonderful for me to see. And I know you worked long and hard on that. Long and hard. But it's
still
beautiful.
Working.
Yeah. And yes.
That's what I like. I mean, I think that's why it's so important, especially for churches. People in general, but churches especially, have this really twisted view of, like, you got to hurry up and get well. Like, if you have faith in God, man, it's like, I don't know, it must be your lack of faith that's holding you back because you're not well. Well, life doesn't work that way for any of us. There are days that kick my butt where I don't want to get out of bed. And that's just doing the normal routine day to day, always in that mode of caring for other people, and I burn out. I mean, almost daily, where like I just hit a wall and I'm like, I got to stop.
Self-care is necessary.
Yeah.
For everyone, and especially those who have been wounded.
Right. And there's no such thing as I just did this. That there's a silver bullet. It's faith. It's exercise. It's whatever. There's this one thing that I do, and then all of a sudden I was healed. It doesn't work that way. And it's there are days where you get knocked back 20 steps, and like there are days when I get a letter in the mail from Dad where it's like I can't even. I have letters in this drawer that I haven't opened for 8 months.
Yeah.
That I just haven't had the energy to open it. Right. So those sorts of things, those really set you back. So it's so important for people to get that healing looks different for everybody, and it is not this linear process.
Yeah, it's definitely
not quick.
No.
And that's okay.
Absolutely.
I have some questions written down. I'm sure we'll think of other things, but I think this is an important one. What message would you give to the millions of survivors who are abused by a close family member as they attempt to heal?
Definitely that you're worthy of love and that you deserve better. As we were just talking, the struggle with self-worth has been huge for me, because a lot of times when I'm stuck in a period of deep depression, I start to feel like the whole reason I was created was to be abused. And it's a really toxic mindset to get stuck in, because even if that was what his intention for my life was, like, I can change that. Like, I can make my own purpose, and so can anybody else.
Yeah, I know it sounds cliche, but, you know, I say it often, like, the abuse doesn't define you.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that those memories stick with you, and it sucks that you have to be the one that's burdened with trying to process that and dig through all those emotions that are all over the map. But it genuinely doesn't define you. That's it's the unfortunate thing when people choose to injure other people on purpose, knowing that it's injuring them, and they do it anyway.
Yeah.
That's out of our control. There's so much, especially as a child, there's so much that's out of our control. And I think that's really hard for a lot of survivors who talk to me. It's really hard for them to get out of that toxic mindset, because they'll ask, and even though they know it's illogical, they'll say things like, well, if only I had done things differently, maybe he wouldn't have targeted me. Mm-hmm. And they know that's irrational, but that's part of that healing, is just it's on your mind, so you just puke those thoughts out. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's so tough.
And then another thing too is I've heard so many stories of friends or people I've met along the way, from talking about the abuse, that have felt obligated to continue contact with their abuser because their family and other family members, even if they know about it, have pushed them to, like, well, he's your dad, or he's your grandpa, or she or he is this or that. That doesn't matter. You have the right to cut anyone off for any reason at any time if, they're an abusive person or if they're bad for your well-being.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, I mean, again, man, this is a message churches need to hear. It is perfectly okay to cut people out of your life, to set up boundaries, to say, I can't be around you and be well. Even if you've stopped the abuse, even if I've aged out and you're not abusing me now, just being in your presence doesn't work for me. I can't be well in your presence. And I think we need to honor that as protectors of innocent and vulnerable people too, whether they're kids or adults. We need to help maintain those boundaries for people and say, you know what, like, if your wish is not to be around this person, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help keep this person away from you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen.
I think what both of you are talking about is probably maybe the most important takeaway of all, that you have the right to make that choice.
100%.
That is your choice, and nobody should try to guilt you into saying, well, that's your father or that's your mother. How could you do this? How could you not, continue? That's in the past. And, we've heard all those things. That is your right to protect yourself and your mental well-being. And there should be nobody to step beyond that boundary to try to guilt you into doing something that is not safe or that is not healthy for you. And I think every abuse survivor needs to understand that and believe it, and not allow other people to guilt them into feeling differently, which is what the churches do, sadly, so much, by saying you must forgive. You must absolutely forgive,
And
or
reconcile.
you will
Yeah.
never heal.
It's insanity.
If I heard that once, I've heard it a million
Yeah.
times. If you don't forgive, you will never heal. Guess what?
People do all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that notion of forced reconciliation is it's just, to me, I can't comprehend that, because if somebody's been battered or is being battered, to say, well, you need to reconcile anyway, and you need to live with them. And there are people who do give that message. There are people in the church that say, to women, if your husband's beating you, you're going to win him over by your quiet and gentle spirit. Well, they wind up dead. Oftentimes, the victim winds up dead. Why? Because abusive people are abusers. They don't care about human life.
Or they are dead inside. It'll squeeze the life right out of you when you live in that fear and in that kind of trauma state. That's the furthest thing from healthy.
Yeah.
And oftentimes suicide is the only viable option for victims that are stuck in extreme
unfortunately,
situations.
that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So once again, Alex, I think that takes a lot of courage, and again, constant introspection, constant re-evaluating yourself and where you are. And if I think we've done a good job within our family. If there are ones who want to have contact with your dad, there's been no judgment or criticism. It's been an individual decision for each one.
And I think, too, though, our family has it in a way that's maybe easy for me or for those of us who don't want to contact him because he is away in prison.
Right.
Whereas those families where it's not the case, they might feel forced into going to family gatherings where that person is going to be there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I think about that
and
all the
feel
time.
Like if they say no, I don't want to go.
Right. If he was out of prison, you best believe he'd be at every family.
Oh, yeah,
gathering.
that's a recurring nightmare of mine, actually, is that he's out of prison and integrated back into the family, and I'm the only one who doesn't want him there.
Isn't that funny? I had a nightmare about that just probably a couple of weeks ago, and the feeling I woke up with was just awful, because I didn't want him there, and yet he was there. And he, just his presence was just awful. And so we are blessed that we don't have that worry or that concern or that daily physical reminder of his presence among us.
Yeah. I mean, my heart breaks for people where that's not the case, and that's the majority of victims. I mean, they will never see their abuser brought to justice, or if they are put in prison, it's a very short stay, and they're right back out again, and there are no laws that protect victims, unfortunately. No. Unless there's a restraining order, it's not illegal for an abuser to contact their victim, which is insanity to me.
It is.
I think that's unjust. I think that's unfair. I think it's not right. But I think, with that separation thing, I kind of adopted this mantra when I was being pushed around and bullied and told of all these bad things that I was doing wrong. And, I took it for a while. Then finally I said, you know what? I've earned the right to give my list to you. So I'm gonna use that phrase. That's kind of my mantra now. I've earned the right. And I think it's okay to say that. I think for victims of abuse, when people are trying to force that reconciliation, I think it's good for victims to remind them, I've earned the right to say what's safe for me and what's not. I've endured abuse. I was the one who was abused. I was the one who was abused against my will, time and time again. I've earned the right to say what keeps me safe, and being around this person isn't safe. And I just encourage survivors to use that, and that's not an arrogant thing to say. You really, truly have earned the right after being abused against your will. You've
that's
earned
called
the right
survival.
to say, these are my boundaries. Whether people agree with them or not. I mean, it's none of our business whether we like your boundaries or not, or the next person's boundaries. It's none of our business.
Right.
And it's our job to support you in that.
Support and respect those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So this is an interesting question because sometimes there's help that comes from surprising places and surprising people and surprising circumstances. So over these 10 years, have you found people and different helps on your healing journey that came from really surprising places that you were like, whoa, where did that come from?
One in particular, so for those who don't know, I'm a yoga teacher and I have a yoga studio here in Somerset. And the person, or how I was led to even starting yoga was, I don't know if I should call her my boss or my coworker at the time, but I was in college right after I reported, and I was a student worker in the information center, and the lady that I worked with was in her last year of work before retirement, so whatever retirement age, early 60s, and she became like my best friend, and she was the person who I would talk to. Even though I had a counselor on campus, I actually kind of talked more to my coworker about everything, and she was really cool about it, whereas each day if I wanted to talk about it, she would be there to listen and talk, or she would tell me, oh, you can just work on your homework if you feel like it, you don't have to talk to me, you can just sit there and I'll be quiet. And she gave me my first yoga mat and invited me to my first ever yoga class, which was like all ladies in their probably 50s to 70s, and then me, a 20-year-old.
Awesome.
But I fell in love with yoga, and actually it became a big part of my healing journey and like helping me manage the symptoms of PTSD. So it was really cool to have her as a friend.
That's really cool because, man, I talk to so many people, so many survivors, and in advocacy, there's like this unspoken rule that the only way to find proper healing is to find a therapist and trauma-informed therapist. And if you're not in therapy, then you're like on this slippery slope, to disaster. And I hear stories like this, and I'm like, sometimes like therapists also get painted into boxes because of their education or background, experiences, personality, whatever. And, like it's cool to hear these stories where this lady probably didn't even know that she was being this tremendous, like that's a life-changing thing. You've had a yoga business for how many years now?
Yeah, I started teaching in 2015, so 6 years.
And, I know Natalie, my wife, and my kids, they don't go often because of our schedules, but when they do go, they love it. They absolutely love it. Granny does.
I do.
She does gentle yoga.
Alex allows me to just stretch out on the mat when I don't feel like doing another thing. She's wonderful. Yes.
But it's cool hearing those stories. Cause
it is.
To me, it just shows the importance of us just to be normal human beings and be decent to other people.
Yeah.
And it's not rocket science.
Be listeners. Just
be something listeners. Like,
yes.
I still remember her phrase when I would come in when I had morning shifts and look like I was tired or not really be in a chatty mood. She'd say, oh, looks like it's going to be an 8-cup morning, and she'd put on 8 cups of coffee for us to share.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's not this linear thing.
I think we all find that kind of person in our lives at some point that is the least suspecting of all people, that brings us a certain level of peace and that just validates that we are somebody. That it's so validating to have somebody care, isn't it? Just to have somebody care. I think, we all need that, and especially when we're hurting, and that often comes from the strangest of places. And look at the age difference. You would think you would gravitate towards someone your age, but here's this lady 3 times your age, and look at the friendship you made simply because she was kind and compassionate and she knew how to listen. So we need that.
It's always been really confusing to me. I've wrestled with this idea that like people who were my closest friends ended up being the ones that weren't there, or they were like, they wanted to hang out, but, like, they didn't want to hear that kind of stuff or, you know, give me the silence or, you know, whatever I needed. And I always wrestled with that and was kind of embittered towards that. But then I think about it and I'm like, you know, our closest friends, like, it's really hard in marriages. It's hard to see your spouse struggle. Like, their depression makes us depressed because we feel that. We feed off of that. Friendships are the same way. I think for our friends, you know, all of our friends grew up hanging out in our house.
And it does. I had one of your friends I ran into last week, and his words were, "Man, I loved coming to your house. I just loved everything about it. It was always so cool and so fun." And it was.
It really was.
It was.
Yeah.
And your dad was the cool, fun person.
Mm-hmm.
Any way you look at it.
And I think for friends, they don't know, I mean, all the intricacies and all the deep, dark, you know, secrets and all the wounds and all the stuff that we've been dealing with and wrestling with as a family. They don't know that because we haven't borne those deep, dark secrets to every individual that we've come in contact with.
Right.
And so, you know, I think for friends, they just get glimpses of the horror. And so for them, it's never really as bad as what we expect it to be for them, if that makes sense.
It's not as real to them.
Right.
Because they experience the good person. They didn't experience this other person.
So I think sometimes...
And they don't want to, by the way.
Yeah, a lot of them don't. So, yeah, I think...
Excuse me. If your friend, the lady that you like so much,
Margaret.
Yeah. If suddenly you found out that Margaret wasn't really who Margaret was, it would probably devastate you.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel that it happened to us. People that knew your dad knew him in such a good way. He helped so many people, and it's devastating to them to think that he could do these things. Yeah. And so the easier way is to just not talk about it, to just, you know.
But that's pretty cool when you find people like that don't.
It
like,
is.
She
didn't,
you know, didn't really have a dime in the fight, and like just was a friend, and that's pretty cool.
I love it. Yeah.
Change your career path.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is awesome.
Even if I didn't get much out of my degree, at least I got yoga out of college.
But you're doing what you love.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. That's really cool. So what would you say is the best help that anybody within earshot of this podcast, what is the best help that they can give to other survivors?
Just being that type of friend who can listen without judgment, and especially not questioning someone. That's the easiest way to make someone feel invalidated, is if you're telling them about abuse or something traumatic you went through and they just want to ask you 50 questions because they need to know all the details and make sure your story somehow lines up right. Like, why? What does it matter to them what the details are? You're telling them this thing you went through. So just to listen if someone wants to talk, or ask them how they need support if you don't know.
Yeah. I think that's really empowering too, because again, as you know, we're really good at looking at people and telling them what they need. Oh, Alex, you really need to be in therapy, you know, like, or whatever. I think it would help if you changed your diet. You know, like you get all kinds of unsolicited advice, right? For what you need to be doing. It's better just to say or ask, what do you need?
Do you feel, Alex, that at some point too, that because what happened is not normal, that you need to feel normal? I can't explain it just right, but I know going through child loss, for me, I want people to show me that they care. I need that. I need to know that they care. But I also needed early on to be treated as a normal person. I didn't want to feel that I needed them to say, "Are you okay?" You know, all of the time, and are you getting help? And I needed some normal things. I needed to go out to a meal, to laugh. I needed to feel somehow not so broken.
Oh yeah, the
Does
best
that make
kind of friends
sense?
are the
Yeah.
ones who will just be there without judgment, knowing everything they know about you, but not treating you any differently than
yeah.
their other friends
Right.
because of it.
For me, three of the most powerful words that I ever hear from people, and it doesn't happen often. Like my wife and I lament this. We're like, we don't hear these three words often, but when we do, it's like we perk up and we're like, wait, somebody wants to. They want to spend time with us. So it's these three words. Let's hang out.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
You know, like we don't
Yes.
hear those words very often. It's usually
So
like,
important, isn't it?
that kind of stuff. Like, are you okay?
Oh,
and like really dramatic and. You know, like we just want to hear, hey, let's hang out. You know,
Yeah.
people call us up, let's hang out.
No questions asked. Let's just eat pizza and just talk.
Yeah.
Or just sit around the campfire. Yeah.
Game nights, campfires.
Yes. Yes. I think that is critically important also. It's just
definitely.
it just validates that we are okay.
Oh
We
yeah.
need to feel okay. That's
It's
all.
another part of that whole going back to the struggle with self-worth and getting stuck in that mindset. It makes it hard to even see your friendships as real because you're like,
Yeah.
oh, these people
It
just
does.
hang out with me out of obligation.
Yep.
Nobody wants to actually be my friend, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, it is nice when someone asks you to just hang out and they mean it and they continue to keep inviting you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, are there any parting words that you would give? Any parting words of wisdom that you would give for survivors who are maybe at the beginning of their healing journey? They feel desperate. They're where you were, depressed, suicidal. What words of wisdom would you give them?
Be patient with yourself. It takes time. You're not going to heal within a day or a week, maybe not even a year. But, keep doing what you can. Take little steps every day to keep working towards whatever your goals are in healing.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll put one more plug in before we close up for patrons. So we do an exclusive podcast once a month. That's only for a certain tier of podcasters. So I have an idea for next month. We won't do it this month, but for next month, I can bring my camera into Alex's yoga studio and film Granny doing gentle yoga for her exclusive. But it's only our exclusive podcasts
no
are just
pressure,
that.
right?
Our exclusive podcasts are just that. They're exclusive. You've got to be one of our patron family members.
Okay.
But I am willing to sacrifice and drag all this
Thanks,
equipment
Jimmy.
out
Thank you.
to get some quality footage of Granny doing gentle yoga.
Okay. Okay, you're on.
So we'll see how many new patrons we get for that little plug.
Okay.
But Alex, as always, it truly was an honor to have you here at the table with us. We need to do it more often. And you continue to inspire me. I know you do your mama.
Yes,
You make her
you
proud.
do.
Thank you.
I know
Melissa.
why you were born. You were born to just fill my heart up. And you do. And you know it. You do.
Well,
I love these two very much. There is, when you've been through a lot together, there is a bond of love that is deeper and more meaningful than words can ever explain. And I feel that all the time with the two of you.
Yeah.
So I am
likewise.
very thankful. And I will do that yoga. I'll tell
All
you.
right.
I'm going to kick those legs and really do good. Okay.
awesome. Well, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you found this very helpful and inspiring. We love you, and we'll catch you next round. Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive.
Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.